Mithical here at PAX West 2017 at the Merge Games booth, checking out Riot, Civil Unrest. Who am I joined with today?
I'm Leonard, original creator, artist of the game.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about Riot for people who might not be familiar with the title.
Well, it's kind of like a crowd control simulator dash game where you actually can have control over either groups of rioters or the police in situations that happen around the world, basically.
Awesome. What inspired you to create this game?
Several things. It's a broad question. I get this a lot, and it's really hard to answer really for any game.
Yeah.
But for this one in particular, it's like pretty important to figure out that this stuff happens a lot, and most of the times we're not really aware of it until you start noticing it, and then it just kind of like becomes more and more something that you get aware with. By doing this game, we also have been learning more about what happens in crowd control ourselves, and that was the most interesting part about this development. So hopefully we're like trying to figure out a way of having people connect with this as well.
Yeah. So when you were developing I can only imagine the AI in this is very difficult to orchestrate and build.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that process in terms of like how did you come up with the way that the crowds behave?
So basically we start off as just human beings as like basic state where they can actually have different emotions. So they can start off from being just casual, they can be angry, they can be scared, they can be pumped. There's like a bunch of those. It's like a big list, and those are the states where the actual characters kind of change. Each person has its own personality. So when they're spawned, based on a certain amount of specific points that I'm not going to go into, but each person is going to have a different personality. That personality is going to influence the person next to him based on what they do. So if someone gets scared, they're going to start scaring other people around them. So how this works is that there's two main things that are the main core of this game. One is, they're both based on physics. So the main one is physical push, where you get like a single person has a certain amount of like physical weight that can do a little bit of pushing, but if you have like a shit ton of people, then you're going to have a big amount of force that is going to physically push the other faction or other people within themselves. The other side is the psychological physics. So basically, whatever scares you or pushes you in a direction, you're going to have that's going to influence just as a physical force push, but as a psychological push. So a force that you don't see directly, but it's this invisible force that actually moves the crowd around, both in like the police side and the rioter side as well.
Right. I also noticed there are elements to it in terms of, on the rioter side, being able to take pictures.
Yeah.
Being able to utilize social media as a way of bringing in the crowd.
Exactly.
Because it's not just about the immediate. Mm-hmm. It's also about what happens afterwards, correct?
Exactly, yeah. Well, I mean, in the story mode, global mode, there's going to be like 4 or 5 levels, and each event, whatever you do is going to be recorded by actual journalists in the game. So there's certain journalists in the game that are going to be around taking pictures, and if you look into detail, you actually can see them taking around the pictures. Those are going to find the points that are most relevant for the outcome, depending on which faction they're approving the most. So usually we're trying to have like a standard neutral, but certain events have like heavy bias towards one side. And by doing that, the influence is going to change in the next event. So if you use pictures yourself, you can actually, for example, have extra pictures of policemen beating up like innocent people with their hands in the air, for example. And the next event, you're going to have more people on your side fighting with you. And by fighting, and I'm not saying violently fighting, because you can actually like decide a bunch of different ways of fighting.
Right.
Violently is the easiest, more straightforward one, but it's not necessarily the best one with the outcome.
Right.
Because if you start using a shit ton of violence on the other faction, you know the other faction is going to be stronger in the next run. Like either the police is going to have more equipment, more gear to defend themselves, or on the other hand, you're going to have more people fighting on your side because they know that it's not right that all that shit has been done to them.
Yeah, and I actually got to see all of that in motion when I was doing my rounds, because my first round, you know, the rioters were they were more passive. I had them kind of standing around
Because
taking
you did
pictures.
the Ignatos campaign, right? In Spain?
I did Barcelona, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
So,
that was a very peaceful sort of riot that we put in.
Right.
That was one of the...
kind of occupying a space, and so that was the first round, and then the second round, actually, because the first one was neutral. The second round, there was a little bit of manipulation where basically the protesters were able to occupy the space, and the police responded with violence that I captured with pictures, which then gave, in the third round, I had like an extra 400 rioters with me.
Yes, exactly.
But then it got violent, and so then the police were responding. And
Exactly,
so I kind of went through the whole gamut, which was really, really interesting.
That's good you noticed. Yeah, that's something we actually cared about of putting in, yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, but there's multiple groups of crowds that you can give varying instructions. So you can have a faction of your rioters that are more aggressive, whereas the majority, say, in the front could be, holding position, being passive.
Yeah, exactly. That's and even this, we didn't design the strategies. We kind of put the elements in. So it's interesting to see how different people come out with different tactical solutions. Like this one is one, for example. With the police, there's other ones. Like, for example, we realized that if you put police in offensive mode, they're actually a good defense, because that means that riders are not going to get close to them, because if they get close to them, they're going to be beat up. So it's kind of like another way of structuring different tactics. We actually, when we look at videos and we see what they're doing, and we try those strategies in the game and they work, that's when we're the most satisfied. Because that's what we want to get out of it. We want to see, does this tactic actually work also in real life, and vice versa. So that's the most important thing for us in the
So what's the timeline for Riot? When can we expect
It's really really hard to say, because there's one programmer full-time, another one part-time on this, and recently the production has been really slow because of a lot of bug fixing. So depending on them, it might take a long time. We can't really tell.
Okay.
It was supposed to be on beta right now, and we're still trying to fix a lot of things. So it's really hard to figure out the right time.
All right.
But
when it does arrive, it's going to be...
It is on Steam, though.
Okay.
So it can be added on the wish list in a way that if you want to know when it comes out, you're just going to be notified. I think that's probably the best way so far to know.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for chatting with us about Riot. The game is very, very interesting, and have a great rest of your con.
Thank you very much. It was great meeting you.